John. We're
And
really
I'm doing.
pleased to welcome Most Worshipful Bob Davis as our speaker today. We're excited to have you here because I think this will help grow our little Lyceum program and get more attendees to participate in our statewide education. So thanks everyone for being here today. We're pleased to welcome Robert Davis, Grand Master of Masons for Oklahoma. Bob is a native of Northwest Oklahoma, being raised on a family farm that produced wheat and cattle. He was initiated, passed, and raised in his father's lodge in August 1969. After earning a master's degree in economics at Oklahoma State University, Bob spent 14 years in city planning and city management. In 1986, he became executive secretary of the Guthrie Scottish Rite bodies in Oklahoma, serving for 30 years before retiring in 2016. Bob's been master of 3 Masonic lodges in Oklahoma. He's a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Mason and recipient of the Grand Cross, past Grand High Priest of Royal Arch Masons, past Grand Commander of the Knights Templar in Oklahoma, past Sovereign Grand Master of the Grand Council of Allied Masonic Degrees, and holds an A certificate in Oklahoma ritual work, and is currently Grand Master of Masons for the Grand Lodge of Oklahoma. Bob is author of 4 books, including The Mason's Words, Understanding Manhood in America, The Journey of Elu to Enlightenment, and In Search of Light, and a course in hieroglyphic and symbolic moral instruction for the Symbolic Lodge. And Bob and his wife Sharon have two daughters and 5 grandchildren. But for all of these awesome titles and jobs, he's a heck of a good guy and a good brother. So we're really glad to have you here, Bob, and we're going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Micah, and thank you, brothers, for joining us this evening. I know these Zoom presentations are very impersonal compared with, face-to-face contact, but it's kind of the situation that we're all in right now, and hopefully it'll soon be behind us. One thing I miss about being retired as the secretary of the Guthrie Valley is that I had regular communications with the brothers in Omaha, and I was able to come up and visit your valley on a number of occasions. And I always felt like that your physical plant was the perfect size for Scottish Rite Masonry. And I have always very much admired the work that you guys do. And so maybe after this COVID thing takes its course, I'll find an excuse to come up and see my fine brothers again from Nebraska. I'm going to talk to you this evening about the journey of the Elu to enlightenment. And I outlined this journey in the book that I wrote about the degrees of the Scottish Rite. But I think it's very important that we think about the Scottish Rite in its purpose and mission to facilitate a man's journey to the mature masculine soul. And in too many cases, men join the fraternity and they embrace the fellowship of men, and they improve themselves in masonry just by their fraternal associations. But sometimes we listen to the language of our rituals and we know it all is pretty stuff and has a lot of moral and ethical insights that it provides us. But until we get engaged in studying the meaning behind the rituals, it's much more difficult for us to actually allow the language itself to be the mechanism by which we become transformed as men and masons. And so I like to point out at the very beginning that all of the degrees of Freemasonry were designed after the model of the hero's journey, the old mythic model of the human in search of himself on a quest to reconcile the opposites within so that he may become transformed in the consciousness of God. And when we think about the hero's journey, uh, and we think about the quest that we're on, relates to this old mythic truism, then we can look at the language of the fraternity and what its purposes are with a different set of eyes. And the hero's journey always begins with the call to adventure. And the call to adventure takes place when a prospect makes a decision to petition for the degrees of masonry. That is his call to adventure. That is his call to take himself to a different state of being, to undertake some significant change in his life that will help him in very significant ways. And when he crosses the threshold, uh, at that moment is when he's leaving the preparation room and has prepared himself for initiation for the first time. And then he begins his journey. And so I think the fundamental thing we need to think about is that across every mythology the world has ever known, this is the story of the hero's quest. It's the search for the Holy Grail, it's the search of the Master Mason for the lost word, and it is the quest in the Scottish Rite for the royal secret. So you see, every body of the Rite allegorically explains a different element in this quest tradition, because the experience of a candidate through the degrees of the Rite is supposed to be a journey to a higher awareness. It's designed to carry a man to a higher level of insight. It is a progressive system of awakening consciousness, and its power lies in its ability to integrate its lessons into the psyche of each man, giving him an opportunity to be transformed by the path of his own life. And so the Rite was built on a clear understanding that men need to be engaged in a quest for self improvement. For men, life needs to be seen as a journey. And men have to be initiated into manhood. And the Rite facilitates this fundamental psychological need in men. It's all about awakening the slumber of our consciousness. Now, almost every Mason knows that the degrees of Freemasonry represent the journey of a man's life. And we've heard it often said that the entered apprentice degree represents the journey of youth. It's the passage a young man takes as he begins to consciously weigh the differences between right and wrong, between ignorance and knowledge, good and evil. And he starts to mold the character that he will fashion for himself, using the influences of his life as his guide. He has, in a real sense, been initiated by the circumstances of his own life, for good or bad. And so Freemasonry provides him a stable image for life building and admonishes him to start all over if his first attempt did not go so well. So a brother becomes an Elu in the very first degree of Freemasonry when he receives the apprentice's prayer. If you'll recall, he's brought into our sacred space for the first time. He's knelt at a point west of the altar. The worshipful master comes down from the east, lays his hand upon the candidate's head, and at that moment, with the oil of the master's hand, our new aspirant is anointed as one of the elected ones, or the elite, entering the brotherhood of man. He has been interviewed by his peers. He's been elected by a unanimous ballot to set himself apart from the profane world. He's selected to become one of us because we are supposed to have seen in him the potential to rise among the best, to become the small elite of enlightened minds. We know he has been anointed at this point because immediately after he receives one of the oldest ritual prayers known to Masonry, he makes his first circumambulation about the lodge under a scripture reading that informs him of the precious ointment that fell down upon the beard, even Aaron's beard that went down to the skirts of his garment. Aaron, after all, was the high priest of Israel. So you see, he becomes an elected one at his initiation into Masonry, as do all of us. But even though he's chosen, he may not become enlightened. God has made men with different intellectual and spiritual motivations and capacities. And so the Elu principle avows that from the ranks of men who desire to improve themselves in Masonry, some will take on the pursuits and occupations of the initiate's life. These will become the perfect Elus, the continuators of creation who will receive the highest levels of knowledge and insight. These will become the gifted and enlightened men. So if you don't take anything else away from my talk this evening, consider well the opportunity and the potential we have as an elected one in our private society of men. So now that we clearly know that we're on a journey, where does it take us? Well, we can think of the journey or the passage of the fellowcraft as one where the initiate takes stock in the progress he has made in his life. It's kind of a review of what he knows and doesn't know, what has worked for him, and what still remains to be done. And during the journey of the winding stairs, he makes an accounting of what he's learned from his own experiences, his upbringing, his friends and acquaintances, his education, and the culture and community in which he was raised. And if he's like most men, he reaches a point where he has studied just about everything in his life but himself. He becomes consciously aware that life is not just about outward appearances, tasks, money, and relationships. He feels a hunger for additional meaning. And Masonry informs him that to feel complete, he ultimately has to affirm himself. And this requires a different kind of journey altogether. And in Masonry, we think of this more intimate and deeply engaging step in the journey of manhood, an important awakening for each man. In ritual terms, it is called passing the outer door of the temple. And it occurs when he passes the south after his ascent of the winding stairs. In fact, he's told by his spiritual guide, and in our jurisdiction, that would be the senior deacon, that he's entering the inner temple. He is embarking upon a journey within himself. And my brothers, this is a journey 4/5 of the male population in the world will never choose to take because they don't know how. Yet the consequences of not knowing oneself are staggering. And we encounter this profound realization in the Master Mason's degree when we encounter the ruffians for the first time. And this is often wrongly interpreted as meaning someone else's bad guys. But you see, the three ruffians represent the worst aspects of ourselves. And the essence of the drama section of the degree is that we all have unfinished business with ourselves. We are, in fact, our own worst enemies. And the sole lesson of the tragedy is that we must overcome ourselves before we can be truly free. And this task is an essential prerequisite for the attainment of wisdom, strength, and beauty. So one of the goals of Freemasonry is to help men take this most significant step forward with their own life, this process of overcoming themselves and affirming who they are. Because the journey to mature masculinity doesn't stop for the rest of us just because some guys choose to exit the train. But for the man who sincerely sees Freemasonry as a transformative art, everything it suggests to him and instructs him from that point in his life where he consciously decides to work on himself has to do with his awakening consciousness. Thus, awakening consciousness is the central quest of the Blue Lodge. The experience of the candidate through the degrees of the symbolic lodge is supposed to be his journey to a higher consciousness. It's designed to carry a man to a higher level of insight. It is a progressive system of awakening consciousness, and its power lies in its ability to integrate its lessons into the psyche of each individual, meeting him on the level of his own experience and giving him an opportunity to be transformed by the path of his own life. Now, this is serious, profoundly serious work, and it admonishes us to be aware that everything we do in the sacred space of lodge or on stage, every word we speak, every move we make is supposed to create an illusion that takes the candidate to another realm of consciousness. And the introduction of the Rite clearly facilitates this journey for our aspirant. If the quest of the Blue Lodge is the journey to awakening consciousness, then the quest of the Lodge of Perfection is a quest for self-discovery. The reason the ruffians are not captured and brought to justice until the 9th and 10th degrees is that the authors of the Scottish Rite rituals believed every man needed to spend some time becoming aware of his own ruffians and bringing them to justice. And to a large extent, the degrees of the Lodge of Perfection relate to the shadow side of our existence, our ruffians within. And even though it's never clearly stated, there is a ruffian element in each of the degrees from the 4th to the 10th. And to just go through these quickly, the 4th and 5th degrees, of course, awaken our psyche to a sense of incompleteness, of something missing, as symbolized by the death of Grandmaster Hiram Abiff. We meet in a lodge of sorrow, but what really is missing is the unfinished business we have with ourselves. So the ruffian element in the 4th degree is the mystery of our being that has not yet been revealed to us. Our inadequate understanding of things, our ignorance and short-sightedness, our passions and prejudices, our selfish motives and lazy approaches to learning. And in the 5th degree, where we celebrate the last obsequies or the funeral rites of Grandmaster Hiram, the shadow element represented there is our selfish interest and self-serving motives that hold us back from assuming full responsibility for our lives and those who depend on us. In the old rituals of the Scottish Rite, when the candidate is raised in the 5th degree, he is given the working tools, and those working tools are given him because we recognize that he now has a different set of tools and a different base to work from in his journey forward. Now, the 6th to the 8th degrees represent struggles that we all encounter in trying to build ourselves toward a wiser, stronger, and more beautiful state of being. And on this journey, we all discover ways in which we are internally conflicted, where one part of our psyche seems untrustworthy and irreconcilable with another part. If we recall the debate between Hiram, king of Tyre, and King Solomon, it's we have to learn how to bring the factions of disharmony within together into a working harmony. And our ruffians in the 6th degree, of course, are hasty judgments, judgments made solely on appearances, our inability to separate perception from reality, our me-first attitudes, our prejudices and fears. And in the 7th degree, the provost and judge, it is our injustice towards those who are different than us, our hastiness to condemn, our failure to decide when decisions are required, our reluctance, our fear of making decisions for fear of being wrong. And then in the 8th degree, it's our failure to learn or apply the techniques required for us to elevate our consciousness to higher ideals, our unwillingness to change and progress. our willingness to advance in masonry or in recognition without study or applying ourselves, our laziness in applying ourselves to the various meanings of truth in philosophy, education, religion, and politics, our latent tendency just to let life be what it will be. And in the ninth through the 11th degrees, we chase down these internal ruffians and we bring them to justice. We learn that ignorance and ambition and fanaticism are our three main ruffians, and they're named, as you know, in the Master Mason degree. And then the 12th degree gives us the tools to work out our new potential. And the 13th degree teaches us that men must find the truth in the caverns of their own consciousness. In the 14th degree, we discover the divinity within us, and we know that the quest for perfection is attainable. And so the first tradition that we've gone through here is, of course, the Elu tradition. The second of the major traditions in Scottish Rite is the Royal Arch tradition. And the Royal Arch tradition teaches us that one of the great mysteries of life is that no man can know the principle of his own life. No single element of life has an intrinsic, essential reality of its own. The power and action of will, movement, of thought, memory, and dreams are all mysteries. Yet we have this natural impulse to seek the unknown, to seek God in the mystery of our own being. And so the Royal Arch tradition maintains that a man must gain access to the knowledge of the divine truth only by seeking ever deeper within his inmost self, his soul. And in Masonry, this is represented by the crypt or vault. It is an inward symbol reminding us that it is the internal and not the external qualifications that make a man a Mason. A man's soul is his spiritual dimension of the universe, the inmost part of his being, where alone he may feel and realize the nature of God and find peace within himself. Now, the quest of the princes of Jerusalem and the chapter of Rose Croix then is to purify the light of discovery and knowledge and make it the guiding force in our life. We are building a temple of freedom for our soul, as well as a heritage that enables our soul to impact favorably on the lives of others. We learn of principal ethics, and having discovered who we are, how this new energy will play out in our life. And we know it requires moral fiber. And we have to be able to conquer temptations to be truly free. That's the principal lesson of the 16th degree. And then in the 17th degree, it's all about change, holding to the traditions that are sound, discarding those that have proven to be invalid, and taking on the new condition of life we have as an awakened individual. We learn that differences in religions do not matter, that truth prevails in people's words and deeds. And this raw power is expressed in the 18th degree as the law of love. In fact, among the most easiest of emblems to interpret, the rose and cross is one of the great combination symbols of Freemasonry, second perhaps only to the square and compasses. To the Christian Mason, the cross refers to Jesus Christ, but in a broader sense, it symbolizes self-sacrifice for the sake and redemption of mankind. The rose, being among the most beautiful of flowers, symbolizes perfection and represents hope and a new awakening, renewal, a resurrection of life. And the two together, the rose and the cross, symbolize faith and hope in immortality, won through sorrow and sacrifice. So the Rose Croix tradition, which is the third tradition, informs us that the world is what it is, and we should focus on how to deal with it so that the good and the law of love may prevail. This requires a constant fight within ourselves and in society, because faith in God and mankind is wisdom. Hope in the victory of good over evil gives strength, and charity towards all living creatures through respect of life, tolerance, and selflessness is beauty. Now, in the Council of Kadosh, we make a journey through the ancient mystery traditions, the 26th through the 27th degrees, to learn that reason and logic can only take one so far. To truly communicate with the Godhead requires faith, yet faith alone is untrustworthy. We find that reason validates the faith experience, and this balance between faith and reason is where true religion is found. The ancient mysteries tradition, then, is one of those timeless checks and balances which reminds us that our concept of deity must be felt within because it cannot wholly be conceived intellectually. A society's concept of God and the universe also changes over time with its scientific development. So the objective of the mysteries was to cause a change in the initiate's condition of mind, wherein he could feel the common core or universal truth in all religious traditions. The methodology Masonry employs to treat topics that cannot be known or explained is to mystically inspire a feeling about these higher principles through the use of an expression of symbolic images, emblems, and hieroglyphs. This was the way of the mysteries. Rather than a prescribed routine of creed, the mysteries invited their initiates to seek, feel, compare, and judge in order to awaken the mind and develop its creativity. The ancient mystery tradition affirms that the gap often created by the insufficiency of popular religions and dogmas can be filled by reason and virtue. So we become adepts, and then we investigate the traditions of knighthood in the 28th through the 30th degrees. Every man needs to possess at least some knightly energy. Being a knight is one of the essential archetypes of manhood. And Freemasonry draws on the knighthood tradition, which dates back to the Crusades. Knights were expected to be the most gallant and virtuous of men, and such men dedicated to themselves to the defense of right in the world. Their basic ideals were family unity, moral education, courage, honor, and courtesy. A Mason is first and foremost a moralist, a philosopher, a symbolist, and a spiritualist. But he's also a soldier of honor and loyalty and duty and truth, actively engaged in the warfare of life. The knighthood tradition declares that the fight for the very best virtues against ignorance, tyranny, and fanaticism must be a constant engagement. Life is a battle for good, and to fight that battle heroically and well is the great purpose of a Mason's existence. We all progress upward toward perfection through the same life struggles and existence. Our goal is to live up to the promise of the Alus, and this is the essence of Masonic knighthood. We then, in the 31st degree, the first of the consistory degrees, is to take a long look at ourselves, who we are, what is our nature, what are we here to do, what definition of truth have we formulated and tested. Is it different now than it was at younger ages? Do we know who we are? Are we content with who we are? What are we supposed to do once we know who we are? And then in the 32nd degree, we discover the answer to all these questions. And it has always been within us to find. The final tradition in the Scottish Rite is the secret tradition. Now, there is no essential secret in Freemasonry, since it is, above all, an aptitude and a state of mind. It is a virtual secret to the uninitiated, much like literacy is to an illiterate. Secrecy in Masonry is synonymous with mystery, and a mystery is a reality which has not yet been fully understood. The major goal of our lives as masters of the royal secret is to unravel the mysteries of our own life. And the secret tradition represents the quest for equilibrium in the universe, the harmony and unity of the whole, and its application to our personal lives. And this is the ultimate quest of mankind, and teaches us above all else to reverence ourselves as divine immortal souls and to respect others as such, since we all share the same divine nature, intelligence, and ordeals. And this requires love, which is the true word of a master mason, the royal secret, and holy doctrine of every true brotherhood. This, my brothers, is the journey of the Scottish Rite, born of the changes in global consciousness from the past and cultivated during the rediscovery of freedom through the brotherhood and measure of the man of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. And for men, it is a powerful path to mature masculinity, personal development, and spiritual transformation. And I know of no other organization in the world which offers men this kind of facilitated path. It is essential to their well-being. And my brothers, it makes what we do in our private society of men, in this institution known always as Freemasonry, the most important thing that we have ever undertaken in our life. It is the journey of the Elu to enlightenment. And that's my formal comments for this evening.
Thank you very much. That's a lot to think about and really puts a perspective to think about on our degree work. We are asked by Russ Reno. Most Worshipful Russ asks, what is the role of the Lodge in aiding brothers engaged in this journey?
Yes, that's a very good question. And unfortunately, too often, the Lodge does not understand what its role is. And the most significant thing that a Lodge can do is honor and revere its sacred space. And the sacred space is the tiled setting of the Lodge. It is that place between worlds, and it is not supposed to have any characteristics of the profane world. We are supposed to leave the profane world in the anteroom when we come into that sacred space. That sacred space is tiled for a reason. It's tiled so we can have intimate conversations with each other in a protected place where we can work on our inner selves, where we can stay focused on the inner work that we have to do with ourselves. And if we bring all of the characteristics of the outside world into that sacred space, then we have not created a space that is conducive to transformation. To the extent that a lodge can keep its sacred space, something that's clearly different from the outside world, then they can at least begin to develop an attitude and the state of the mind of the candidate that this is something different than he's experienced before. It is so unique and so eccentric that he cannot find it anywhere else in his life. That's the kind of ambiance that we need to create. And therefore, the rituals that we perform and the floor work that we do need to be done in the most serious manner. There is not anything humorous or lighthearted about the time we spend in that sacred space. One thing I really like about the traditional lodge movement is that they tend to make that sacred space a darkened space. Uh, and they tend to use music behind their degree presentations. And they use candle lights, and so they create this space outside or inside, the outside world. And when you're in it, that you're there for a different reason, and that's to study the nature of yourself, the nature of God, the nature of universe, and how we play out our lives in our relationship with others. So that's the role I think Blue Lodges should play in beginning this journey. And of course, they should also somehow, in their education with their lodge brothers, explain to them that this is the journey of the hero. It is the journey to the mature masculine soul. And so even that awareness can make a lot of difference, I think.
Yeah, I like the idea. I like your answer a lot. And the recording that we're making tonight, I can see being used effectively in both Scottish Rite Valleys and in some respects in some of the Blue Lodges to give people an idea that this is the role that we're playing, and if you don't understand that, we're letting our candidates down.
Right.
So very good. I'm just
Yeah, Don,
very pleased.
I'm sorry, Don, I'd like to second that. As someone who tries to communicate the degrees when, we don't do all of our degrees in our valley, putting this in the context of the hero's journey and all the Jungian symbolism that goes into that, and doing it in a matter of 30 minutes is amazing. And so, I mean, we would do so well just to show this video or this recording. I'm wondering, is this the kind of a smaller version of your book on the Elu's journey?
Well, absolutely. Everything that I talked about this evening is in the book. But what I have focused on in that book are the central interpretations that we should make from the teachings of the degrees themselves, and I focus primarily on on in, on interpretive studies rather than historical studies,
Right.
because I know that we're on a quest here, and I know that each of the four bodies of the Rite address that quest in different ways. And so if you don't know how each degree addresses it, then you miss it. And so that book is focused on that. I also talk about what enlightenment means, what toleration means, what freedom means. I do give them, a quick history of the timeline of how the degrees of Freemasonry and the Scottish Rite in particular came to be. And I think I have a chapter just on initiation itself. And also, I have a series of discussion questions at the end of each of the degree chapters,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can actually have discussions in lodge or in your Scottish Rite education programs where brothers are discussing, those questions.
But was this essay that you read this evening, has that been published somewhere? Because it so encapsulates everything in such a simple yet complex, if I can say that paradoxically, simple yet complex way.
Well, I mean, shortened versions of it have appeared in a number of Scottish Rite Valley publications. But again, the information is all in the book, and you're welcome if you find that this Zoom meeting is worthy, to be shown. You're welcome to show it. It's certainly not copyrighted material. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we just recently had a reunion where I think we had 4 men go through, and I want to get on the email and send them a link to this. But
How many degrees, if I might ask, how many degrees are being conferred right now in the Omaha Valley over a course of a year?
We do roughly, and Kurt and Dan can better answer this, 15 or so.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. I knew that you guys did a number of them, and I personally feel like that that we need to be staging at least 13 of the 29 degrees in order to tie the quest traditions together. If you're only doing the obligatory degrees, it's just almost impossible to see the journey.
right, right. And there was a question from Russ Reno about where could we watch this recording once again. And Mike, I presume that's on the web page. Is that correct?
This will be on our Nebraska Scottish Rite YouTube page, and we'll have that up in a couple of days.
Great.
Hey Dan, when I head out to Hastings to do some communicated degrees, this would actually be kind of a neat little video to show maybe during a break time.
Yeah, and a good refresher for ourselves, right? I've always seen the hero's journey motif in masonry, but I've never heard it really spoken about so explicitly. And so I'm so glad that, Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung and everybody else that's involved with this is, getting their say, because it's always how I've seen what we do. So well done. And I will shut up so other people can speak.
You guys do good work. I've always admired what you guys have focused on in the Omaha Valley, and your fraternalism is better than your degrees. And when you combine fraternalism with the work that we do, it's just a home run. It really is.
Well, I appreciate your time tonight, Bob, especially you've heard the rumors of Deputy Dan. I've just kind of taken responsibility at the first of the year. Just got through the KCCH investiture. The coronation was last Saturday night, and
we're doing ours, I think, on the it's October 31st. Is that a Sunday?
I believe it is. Yes.
Yeah, we're doing our honors day on Halloween.
Yeah, I've been degree director for the 33rd for the past almost 10 years now, but it's changing a little bit now that I have a different role.
I know. Yeah. Well, I'm sure happy that you took on that responsibility. I wish you the best of luck, and you've got a great team to work with.
Oh, I am blessed to be the steward of this fine organization.
I noticed that John Williamson has a question about how he can get the book.
Oh, you can buy it on Amazon. There's a black and white version of the book, and there's a color version of the book. I think the color version of the book is $40. You can also purchase it directly from me on my website, which is www.robertgdavis.net. And the advantage of purchasing it from my website is that you get a signed copy.
Well, that's worth something. I'm going to ask Micah if he's going to pop back in, because he is, there we go, the man of the evening. Do you have anything else you want to add, Micah?
Well, again, I just want to echo thanks for speaking. I certainly think, as one of the worst ritualists in Nebraska Freemasonry, what you say is refreshing, because I think of the lodge meeting as an hour-long discussion on paying a $23 phone bill, or who's bringing the beans and chicken next month, instead of that quest for a higher consciousness, which is what we all want Masonry to be. So I appreciate you saying that. To let everyone know, next month we're going to welcome Matt Zermosky. He is coming to us as a Grand Junior Deacon for the Grand Lodge of Virginia, and he's going to talk about the 300 years of history of the Grand Lodge of Virginia. Many of you may know him as the Development Director at the Scottish Rite House of the Temple, but we've invited him here in his capacity as a Grand Lodge officer. So he's going to share some history with us. And in December, Dr. Wendy Wassett-Barrett is joining us, and she's written a lot of history on Masonic scenic drops. And she's visited Hastings and Omaha and can tell us a little bit about the history of our scenic drops. So I hope you guys will come back.
Dan, Deputy Dan, you get the last word.
I had my words, and I'm just thanking illustrious Brother Davis for his time tonight, and it really, really was wonderful, wonderful information. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is a toast to you. There you go.
Yeah, so nicely done. We should really clap. Thank
Mine's
you so
empty.
No, excellent meeting.
I should have put whiskey in my container instead of water.
Next time.
Good night, brothers.
Okay,
Good night,
good night,
everyone.
brothers. Yeah.
Thanks all for
Be
joining.
safe.
Good night,
Be
everyone.
safe.